Hey everyone, it's great to be here. I've been here on stage quite a few times before, and I've been here either as a tech company founder or as an investor with other companies. Today I'm here talking about urban environments. So why do we care about urban environments? I think it's incredibly important what's the environments that we're spending our days in. It's a place we work in, it's a place we live in. It can make us happy, it can make us sad. And I think we need more great environments. So that's why we're building the biggest hub in the Nordics, right here in Tallinn. But before I talk more about that, I will invite to stage Charles Landry. Charles is an urban strategist, and he will go through a wind whistle tour of the ideas he has for the creative city concept. So it'll be very interesting to hear from him how to create an exciting place, and he'll talk about that, and then we'll come back to the other topics. Charles.
Great. How are you then? Good to see you.
Here we go.
Great to be here. Yeah. It is indeed great to be here. So let's start. That's that. There might be something else that happens. But first, what happens? Oh, enough of that. Anyway, look, everybody is thinking about the future of places, and obviously you are too as well. And one of the interesting things, someone once said, a city is more than a place in space, it's a drama in time. And actually that's true. And I think many of us think we know obviously what a city is like, but if you take a metaphor, a great city is more like improvised jazz than a well-tempered symphony orchestra. So, you know, it's a bit like all of you hanging around here, a version of that. Now, if we think of what a city is, we all know what it is. We know its people, we know its activities, we know its industries, we know its hardware, infrastructure, software. Most importantly, it's actually orgware or organizational culture. Is the culture here open or not, is a question for you. It's networking in some sort of way. It's creating things together, ideally, and collaborating so that the place becomes like a mosaic and an ecosystem. And obviously, it's based on trust, because unless the trust's there, then that bonding and binding together and bridging doesn't happen. So these connections need to be really strong if one wants to maximize the opportunity. And so the best thing, or the most important and most difficult thing, is orchestration, orchestrating all of that like a composer. But I think we really need to wake up, because a lot of things are happening around the world. I don't need to go into them in detail. And so the future sometimes looks dark. Obviously, we know that, and we're very close to horrible things here. But in general, there's a hell of a lot about the world that is rather fragile and in danger of falling apart. And some would say, in many respects, it's 1 minute towards midnight. And this is just an example from Olafur Eliasson. You probably know it, the icebergs from Greenland. And when he brought that to Copenhagen and to Paris, you could viscerally feel the ice melting. And one of the beauties of these sort of things, and using people like artists, is the awareness of what is necessary can often be viscerally felt. Like this was the Ocean Convention in London, and when you saw these fish, you were really, oh my God, I can't bear it, I feel so sorry for the fish, and so on. So basically, we all know, you know, everybody knows that our footprint is far too large, and that there are other alternatives, and I hope all of you investors here are really thinking about different ways of dealing with fossil fuels, getting rid of them perhaps, other options, hydrogen, and so on. Because we can see it already in terms of the air we breathe. And when you just look at the things that have been happening, we know that the Earth's been hurting. So that's all one thing. Now the big issue, there are many big issues, is what is the plan B? What can we do differently? And this is where I think the notion, perhaps, I hope, the art of city making comes in, or the art of creative city making, perhaps more importantly. And I think there's a yearning for things to be done differently. If I'm speaking to people and doing work with them in various places, you can feel this deep, you can see the way I'm standing here, there's something coming from the stomach saying, I want something different. And this is where metaphors matter. I said jazz before. And kasvuhune, or whatever it is, has got something to do with growing along the lines. And when I heard that, and heard kruli, I'm not saying you're going to call it the greenhouse, I really thought, hey, that's great. I like the idea of growing. Now, then, who's growing? What are we bringing? What are you bringing to that growing? But growing is actually something, and I think Kruli is trying to do this, is trying to create a different story of a place to be. This happens to be a pavement in Genoa, so don't worry, but it's saying the right words for me, that there can be a story, because everything about placemaking is essentially also about storytelling. So what I'm suggesting, and I think from what I've heard about Kruli, there's a notion of being best, not only in the world, in Estonia, in Tallinn, but also for the world. So whoever's going to be there is doing things for the greater good in a one way or another. So just one switch of word from in to for can create a completely different mindscape. Now, one of the things I like about the word grow, which is embedded in what you're trying to do there, is that it has so many dimensions. Obviously, you can say it's growing a company, it's growing this, but it can also be about personal growth, all the different versions of growing and the impacts that that can have. Now, I think, and sorry that I'm picking up your word grow, it really generates an energy. And if you're trying to do things in a city, in any place, energy is in a sense the key currency. Energy leads to all sorts of things. It's units of a currency. So another metaphor, of course, and I think kruli, I love saying the word kruli, I can't tell you how much I like that R, is the metaphor we've got, a machine or that of an organism. And clearly, once the word grows in there, it's like an organism. And that led me to think, hey, let's think about being a gardener. Now, if you think about being a gardener, I don't know how many gardeners are in here and how many gardens you've got. Once you do that, it's precisely the attributes that placemakers and city makers need. Because gardeners think about things in a regenerative sense. They think holistically. They think broadly. And that, with that mindset, it conditions, of course, how people think, plan, and act in terms of the physical manifestations that will then evolve. So the gardener and the garden, let's look a bit what's going on. Now, what's interesting about gardening, and I think this is happening in Kruli, is you're really looking, or they are looking, the team is looking very clearly. What is the soil? What's happening here? What are the assets? Is this going to do this here or not, or differently? And so that observing closely is really important. Now, this just happens to be looking out of my window into my garden, and that blob in the middle, for me, is Kruli. Yeah? The rest is the rest of the city. Now, if you just look a bit closer, can you see how you're orchestrating various things? You have to be clear and think, short-term, medium, long-term. Is that plant going to shade this? What will this look like in the winter? Will it work? And so on. And if you look even closer, you can see lots of combinations are being curated and put together. I mean, this is just a metaphor, of course, and of course it requires work. So to repeat a bit, what's happening here is imagination. Imagination, orchestrating, cultivating. It's not just something that you do, say, hi, I've done it, and off I go. It's something that's being maintained over time. So in summary, what we've got there is a 360-degree perspective, which is what we need because we know the problem of silo thinking. We know that for years people have saying, can't we break down boundaries between disciplines? So that's important. The second thing that I think the gardener has is foresight. What will this look like in 5 years' time? Will I need to change it? Have I done the right thing? What will it look like in 10 years' time? Is this going to grow too fast or look so faded that it'll be not very pleasant? So what we've got here is this balance between curation and orchestration through time. And also what it does, because in city making, so many people say, hey, isn't it great? Let's have a summer festival. What's much more interesting, what happens on the 15th of November? Is 15th of November going to be an interesting time, for example, in Tallinn? And it really requires one to do things in a way, obviously renewal and recycling is involved in this, but also getting your hands dirty. So, in short, to sustain it, it needs continual care and maintenance, so it can't be a speculative development, and it is not one. It's about patience. It's about knowing the dynamics of how all of these people who are going to be moving around are acting. Do I need to respond? Do I need to adjust? Within principles. And the principles, I think, are clear, at least to me as an outsider when I heard about Crulli. So, but the other thing that happens in gardening, there's a lot of waiting. And I don't know how long Crulli has been waiting for approvals. That's another parallel. Perhaps it's all been easy, or perhaps you are still waiting for approvals. I don't know. You tell me. There's frustration. There's frustration. I see Kobe here, who will really know about frustration and getting planning approvals and all of that. It is so frustrating. The wonderful projects we see around the world, they take a long time. And when you see the result, you think it just happened in 5 minutes. And often, like nature, unplanned things come in. And therefore, the built structures and all of that need to be open to that flexibility and that agility. So in a way, the gardener, whoever, the Kobes, the Crulli people who are running this are the caretakers, as obviously the decision makers are stewards of the city. Just a final thing about metaphors before I come to my final section is, if you think about things, is this place that is growing, it's bloody big, I spent an hour walking around it yesterday, is it a mycelium? We'll come to that in a second. Is it like a swarm that gathers things? Is it like a butterfly that transforms? Is it like a forest that also regenerates? Is it like a lichen, or is it like a jungle? Anyway, I chose mycelium. Now, I don't know if you know mycelia. They're these things. It's the biggest plant in the world. It's the fungi that connects massively. It nurtures. One tree nurtures the other. If there's a problem in one part of the environment, it feeds it and tries to make it well again. And above ground, there are often things like mushrooms or trees. So essentially, that metaphor of the mycelium, it's a generous network. It's incredibly generous. You should read the book, Entangled Life. It's an information system, and it's an infrastructure. So it's hardware, software, it's all of that together. So there are these endless parallels. And so you may find it a bit too much that I'm using the gardening metaphor, but I thought you're talking a lot about AI and cryptocurrencies. I just thought I'd say something different, you know, just to sort of... I will say crypto, I will say AI, don't worry. But anyway, there are so many parallels. You know, there's incubating, seeding, variety, greenhouse, nurturing. In this, it's a hatchery because there'll be lots of spaces precisely for the type of organizations you are here, who will hopefully be this hothouse, but also an oasis. Now, let's just finally go into what then makes a livable city. And I'm just going to throw things at you. Let's call them 10 principles. Right, a great, livable, creative, resilient, all the good words, vibrant, da-di-da-di-da, places are places of anchorage and distinctiveness. They somehow value the heritage. They are of themselves. So it's Franz Crulli's old place, clearly. Now, this is obviously in India, Jodhpur. This is Fez in Morocco. I'm just showing you other things beyond Crulli. This is Istanbul. They're all very distinctive. You know that you are there. The next thing's great places do, they blend the old and the new. And so many places don't do that. I'm going to give you, we all think Berlin's cool, by the way. Okay, this is the famous Tacheles building, very over the top at one level at one point. Quite crazy place. It gets bought. Then this is the opening. I remember being there. Da-da-da-da, champagne. You've got all the graffiti everywhere. And this is what it becomes. So it does the opposite of blending the old and the new. So that has actually reduced. It may financially be sound, I don't know, but in terms of overall capital, it's lost. There's a loss of social capital and creative capital. So these places are also places of nourishment, which of course nourishment is food, nurture, and I know there's going to be food markets and all of that in Kruli. And it's also, though, I hope, if something goes wrong, there's someone, a nurse-type person who will help you if you're in Kruli and something goes wrong. So all of those things to do with nurture. So these places, and this is difficult, because the more popular Tallinn becomes, the less affordable it will be. And I think there are already these pressures. And the best example of dealing with that through the ages is Singapore. We don't need to talk about it. Some people say it's very restrictive there. But one thing they do know is to provide affordable housing through the generations. And then, of course, a place that has this vitality has to be a connective place. And that can be the physical environment. It could be the steps of La Défense, but it could be, I don't know if you can see this, but it could be, that is La Défense, that's it. But it could be, and there are not many amazing sculptures, but Cloud Gate in Chicago, you know, the thing that mirrors everything, where people just gather all the time, every moment of every day. It could be that. So communication is not only trains and planes and things like that. But I think great places provide opportunities, and there's enough space in Kruli to provide moments for this of critical reflection, where people can discuss. I was mentioning it to Taavet earlier. Perhaps Kruli is the place where the big questions are discussed, the big questions of the world are discussed. And then there's a few more. Obviously, great places, we've talked about diversity today, are places where you can come as you are and be who you are, which then provides that safety and nurturing feeling to explore and so on, where then, through which the ambitions, the opportunities, the idea of reaching for the sky and all of that, which hopefully then is implemented, of course, comes to fruition. And then, of course, I believe, and we've discussed this already, it needs to deal with the big matters of our time. And I know Taavet's involved in many of the big issues of our time. So this just happens to be Venice. You've seen these images before. And then, as we move on, one needs some sort of inspiration. And there's one place, I remember being there so many times in Helsinki, I was always thinking, my God, this place of silence and deep relaxation is so beautiful. You know, it's just next to the station, the bus station. Or even the new Audi Museum, OODI library in the center has again that feeling of, you know, I can inspire to something. I can do things I didn't think I was able to. But one of the great things that completely gets forgotten about city making is having some games, some fun. And one of our great guys who does that, of course, is Banksy. There's a classic local museum in Bristol. You know, nobody goes to it. He subverted the museum, so the lion tamer has been eaten and all of that. In about 80 places, Bristol has 250,000 inhabitants. 400,000 people came to that exhibition. So any museum that feels they haven't got enough visitors, just think laterally. And this is his criticism of consumption. But then, of course, and I don't need to tell you, in Estonia, these great places have to be digitally savvy. You know more about that than I will ever know. And you obviously deal with it in ways that many people... I run a festival called the Creative Bureaucracy Festival, and we keep on having Estonians speak about how you do that, use data and things like that effectively. And so, final 2 points. Great places have a way of measuring capital in a broader sense, and they bend the market energy to bigger picture purposes. So it is about money, but it's about more than money. And then, finally, you can only make this happen if there's good governance around in your own entity, but also the wider city and the country as a whole, and so on. And this is why we started this thing, I don't want to talk too much about myself, called the Creative Bureaucracy Festival in Berlin, chosen on purpose, Berlin, as you can imagine. But a lot of people come to it, 1,700 or so. And what that's about is rethinking rules and incentives for the 21st century. So they enable, we've talked about this today already, you to express yourself fully. So I think that, in passing, is a movement in the making. And with that, my final sentence is, because I like a bit of artist here or there, Brian Eno, you remember him from the old days, amazing guy, said, "Artists are to cities as worms are to the soil." So just getting that gardening metaphor back in. So thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity. Hello, David.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
Fantastic inspiration, and great to see what goes into building one of these creative places. So we'll definitely take away things from here for building Krülli and Kasvuhoone. For me, I think it was the words community and curation that maybe stood out most, and that's something that we're thinking a lot about in how we're building Krülli and how we're building Kasvuhoone. You know, what do we need to create the future? That's kind of the parts that will go into it. So back to what's happening here. So we are going to be building the biggest tech and creative hub in the Nordics. Something that will be here in Tallinn. We're going to start the building work soon, but bricks and mortar takes a horribly long time compared to software, so we're still a couple years away from it. This will be home to all the people who are building the future. It's building the future companies, the future products, whatever it takes. I'm a big believer that physical spaces help people be creative. Meeting others accidentally or by design, that's how the creative process gets started. And people are better in coming up with things if they are sitting together in the same physical space, which is why I believe this is going to be needed. It's going to be a home for more than 1,000 people and 100 companies. We're going to be inviting people, programmers, creatives, chefs, whatever they do. It's a place for everyone who wants to be building the future. Also, we'll move a few existing things there. Plural, Skaala, coding school, Code. Then I think creative destruction lab, all the things that already are existing will move there, but there's room for a lot more. Why it's important to build the future? I think we are standing at a very important point for Europe altogether. In a world where rapid deglobalization and the tripolarization of the world, with US being the one pole, China being another pole, and everything else in the middle. It's us in Europe, it's the Middle East, it's India, it's Canada. We need to be building a lot to make this future sustainable. We need to build our independent energy solutions. We need our defense solutions. We need finance. We need space. Hopefully, we can be part of building some of these things in Estonia, and we can really accelerate and have impact for all of Europe. So, what is Kasvuhoone? It's being built in the Krülli neighborhood. Krülli is an old industrial neighborhood not far from here, about a 15-minute walk. They used to be building heavy machinery there about 100 years ago. Right now, it's been left unused for a while, and we're working on reinvigorating this, building it into a modern 5-minute city, where within these 5 minutes you can work, play, and live. It's a project in the making. We'll start the first phase construction real soon. To make Krülli and Kasvuhoone, we've teamed up with, we believe, the best of the best around Europe. So Kobe architects from Denmark who are really amazing in city planning. If you go to Copenhagen, you can see a lot of what they've done in Copenhagen, and helped by Estonia and Coco. The Kasvuhoone building is going to be 15,000 square meters, and it's going to be really the heart of the Krülli neighborhood. It's not just co-working for 1,000 people. We're going to have room for lots of content. There's going to be different accelerator programs. We have teamed up with Norsen from Sweden. The Norsen Foundation is bringing the Norsen Impact Accelerator to Estonia, which we're really excited about. CDL will move here. There's also going to be a pretty special food court, and of course, a bakery and a roastery. Why I believe this is important? I'm really excited to see what I can do to help accelerate Estonia. I spend my days at Plural, where we are investing in the most ambitious European founders who are building meaningful companies. Hopefully, Kasvuhoone will be one piece of the puzzle that will help accelerate Estonia and ultimately also accelerate us in Europe. This is something in the making. We will be working with the community to gather ideas what to put in here. We're going to start the construction later this year, and this will be ready in 2027. Hopefully, Latitude 2028 will be happening in Kasvuhoone. And there will be another session at 3:30 at the future stage, where Nina from Kobe and Sten and Kristina and Rebecca from Notion will talk a bit more about what's going to be growing inside Kasvuhoone. But meanwhile, send us your ideas, grab some of the seeds, plant them, and hope to see you in Kasvuhoone in a couple of years.